Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Lots of crazy games this past weekend. I'm your host, Blue Jay, alongside with your other host, JNT250. Before we get into it, I wanted to know your thoughts on the games this past weekend. If you were to rate them 1 out of 10, what would you say the games were like this past weekend?
Definitely, they're very good. Not as good as a couple weeks ago where we had all the 40-minute bangers, but definitely a lot of better quality games in terms of one, entertainment, two, the level of play, and three, even the drafting. We saw, a bunch of different drafts, different picks this week, and yeah, it was a pretty exciting week.
I would have said the games were great until the Dignitas Golden Guardians game came along, and that was when I really think that the games kind of fell off. But overall, still some pretty good games. Um, Getting into our first topic of the day, we need to discuss Evil Geniuses because this team is doing so much right now. It's hard to keep up with all the moves that they're making. Um, where to start? This roster is making moves with their top laner, making moves with their mid laner. I want to know your thoughts on which roster you think is better. Do you think that we got the new roster being better or the old roster?
I don't know, it's hard to tell. I think most people, they're going to be a little bit biased to side with the new roster, specifically because they beat C9. And beating C9 is such a huge deal. Like when 100T beat C9, everyone was hyping up 100T, and now with C9 losing another game, people are kind of, you know, the question is if C9 is slowing down or if teams are speeding up. But specifically with EG, I'm still, I think, more on the side of the old roster. I was kind of surprised, honestly, when I heard that they signed Goldenglue and then they decided to sub in both Huni and Goldenglue for this coming weekend. But it was very interesting, and I think they played really well against C9. Didn't have a very clean game against Team Liquid. Honestly, looked pretty sloppy, but I guess it was their first game playing together in like an LCS game with that roster. So it's a little bit understandable that they could have had a bit of a slow start, but really played very well against C9. Want to point out specifically Zazel. I think Zazel had a great game that game. But I don't know. For me, I'm still on the side of the old roster, but I definitely want to see, if they're going to continue with this new roster and then how it looks moving forward in the playoffs.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is so I actually think the old roster was the better thing to go with simply because, well, first of all, I don't think that Golden Glue is an improvement over Jizuke. I do know Jizuke was very hit or miss. Don't get me wrong there. Like you don't know what you were getting with him all the time, but I don't think that Golden Glue has shown anything spectacular for him to be worthy of taking over Jizuke's spot, who was your main carry in so many of your wins. And the other thing is that even with Kumo not maybe looking as good at the start of the split, or not looking as good now as he was at the start of the split, I don't think Hooney's looked good either in a long time. So I'm not really too high on either of those on either of those moves. Uh, but I do think it does bring a different attitude to the team, and so that's one thing that I think it's done really good for. And I think that may be the main reason why they were actually able to take down Cloud9 this past weekend. With that said, I don't think we can forget the game that happened just before that on Friday night against TL. This team looked so bad, and it looked like it was an absolute disaster when they made the moves. I don't know what your thoughts were on that. Very night and day from one game to the other.
Yeah, definitely. I think, if the game against C9 would have played out like the game against Team Liquid did, I think, people would be heavily questioning EG in terms of their actual decision to swap out their, what I would consider their best performing player in Jizuke. And, Kumo's become sort of a rock in the top lane for the last couple weeks. But yeah, I mean, just as you mentioned, with teams subbing in new players, they get a bit of a new look, a bit of a restart. Teams, previous teams, whenever they make moves like this, they always say, specifically in the team environment, it's always better and, can be good to get some fresh faces in, to keep the morale high. Like if your team's on a losing streak, just getting some new players in will definitely help the team morale. And you gotta wonder what their initial reasoning for the substitutions were. But I mean, to go out and take a game off C9, you gotta give credit to the substitutions in some case.
Yeah, definitely. And what that does now with C9 win or pardon me, with beating C9 and losing so heavily to TL, if you're management, now you're stuck in this spot where I don't think it's very clear what the next step is. You sign Golden Glue to a 7-day contract. He comes in, kind of feeds in the first one. I would say he was the biggest part of their loss in the first one. And then he was hitting every single bubble on Zoe in his second game against Cloud9. I couldn't put my finger on Goldenglue. And so now you got to wonder, are they going to offer him another contract? And if they're going to offer him another contract, how long is this one going to be? Are you going to just keep signing a guy for 7 days every time? I feel like there has to be some rule within the LCS that doesn't allow that to happen all the time. But yeah, definitely interesting, and I'm glad I'm not part of EG management right now because that is a very difficult decision to make. And I don't know what you do now. You don't want to piss off Jizuke. I think that sitting Jizuke, he's probably not happy with that. He's probably fuming that he comes over to NA, and I I don't want to paint every EU player with the same brush, but a lot of them come over with the attitude of they're going to just own NALCS because they've been playing in a better league, but it doesn't always translate that way. And so you got to wonder if Jizuke's pretty upset now about being benched and how that goes about whether he's going to want to come back next year.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting when the news first like came out. I think it was Tuesday of this past week that Goldenglue was signed to a 7-day contract. And when you first hear of like somebody getting signed to only a 7-day contract, basically they're only getting signed to play one weekend of LCS. You got to kind of wonder like what EG's reasoning for doing this was. Maybe, like they've made no statement on the specifics and why they subbed out Kumo and Jizuke for Huni and Goldenglue. I know part of it is because they originally picked up Huni because they recognize that he's still, they believe that he's still a strong player, and when he becomes an NA resident next season, there might be a chance that if he's performing well, he'll get to play. But when someone's only signed to a 7-day contract, you got to wonder if they're playing for their life that one weekend, and EG is going to have to take a look internally to see if Goldenglue, earned another shot, another weekend to play LCS, and as you said, maybe if it's a 7-day contract or they sign him for the rest of the season, but it's they've put themselves in a bit of a predicament in terms of what to do going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And again, like I said, I don't know what this team's going to do. I don't know what this team's going to look like in the future. Like, here's the thing: it's past week 6 now, right? You have 3 weeks left of LCS, and you have no team identity right now because you're swapping in and out players. So a little bit of criticism, I think, needs to be shined on Evil Geniuses for that reason. You need to figure out what your squad is and what team you're going to go with moving forward. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody knows what that is, and I think that's the biggest worry for EG.
Yeah, I don't got too much else to say.
Okay, and so that neither do I. Honestly, I don't think there is much to say. I think we're waiting to learn a lot of things from Evil Geniuses in the coming weeks, and we're going to learn things whether it's good or bad. That's remained to be seen. But moving on, we'll move on to our next topic, which would be our main topic for the week. This week, we wanted to do something a little bit different for you guys. We didn't want to just throw power rankings in your guys' face again. So we wanted to actually talk about just which teams were on the rise and which teams were falling, and then which teams were just kind of hanging out, not really getting better or not really getting worse. So we're gonna start off with the teams on the rise. First team we want to talk about here is Golden Guardians. This is a team that we had a lot of hopes for coming into the season, and then they kind of performed a little bit poorly to start the season, and now we're starting to see them pick it up and really start to show their true identity, I think. And so I want to know your thoughts on Golden Guardians and how you think they're going to perform later on in the rest of the year.
Yeah, as you said, this team had a bit of a slow start. I believe they started the season off 1-3, and even I think 1-4 because they lost their first game of the third week of LCS. And then I guess since then, just taking a look at their record, they're 5-2 in their last 7 games, which is, one of the better stretches of, record in the last few weeks. And like I just said, they had a slow start. I think you can attribute that to closer underperforming a little bit. He had a rough couple of first weeks. He played some aggressive junglers like the Nidalee and like the Graves, and was able to garner some early game leads, but kind of his champions weren't really like able to have such a huge impact on the game. But what I am really loving from them is picking closer the Olaf. He's had a lot of impact on the game. He has a lot of agency. He's kind of allowed to do whatever he wants. They're we've talked about this team before as being sort of like a younger, not a younger, but inexpensive C9 or like a B-Tech C9 in terms of their play style, where they like to play super closer centric and play around closer, draft for closer, as C9 does, which is play around Blabber, around all Scuttle Crabs and all Dragons. And I think they've been doing a really good job of it. This team is starting to look, they have a little bit more of an identity, as we're talking about with EG. You need to have an identity in this league to be able to be consistent and pick up wins. And I think we're really starting to see that.
Yeah, and so you made me think of a really interesting thing because so many people have compared them to Cloud9, calling them the baby Cloud9 or C9's little brother, whatever you want to call it. However, an interesting little stat that I found on Golden Guardians this week is they actually have the longest game duration in the league, sitting at 36.28 minutes. That is pretty long considering they're being compared to Cloud9 so much, and for good reason because I do think they have similar play style. But like, if there's one thing that Cloud9 is also known for, it's closing out their games pretty quick. And so that's one thing that I thought was totally night and day when it comes to C9 in comparison to Golden Guardians. And so I really think that that's something they're going to want to shore up is to improve their game duration. And a couple other stats is this team is actually second in the league. So these are some better stats. This team is second in the league in dragon percentage at 60.2% dragon percentage. Something that I would not expect out of a middle of the pack team. You would expect to see that out of TL, who's sitting like tied for first with Cloud9 right now. And another stat is they're actually third in the league in goal differential at 15. And all the other teams below them are all in the negatives. They're third in the league at 752 goal difference at 15. So a really good early game stat, which is a little bit not what you would expect when you see that their game duration is actually the longest. So it's very clear from this that their biggest issue isn't getting a lead, but it's closing out the game when they get a lead. And so that's something that I think that we start to see them do a lot more within the most recent weeks. And that's why, to me, I think this team is definitely on the rise. Just for those kind of stats right there, but also just the performances out of closer. You're starting to see more of that spring split closer come back. And I've actually really been liking Demonte on his Kennen, or pardon me, Hanser on his Kennen. I think that he's been great in team fights, and he hasn't been getting dumpstered in lane like he should. And I really have liked Demonte being on just his fill role. He'll just play anything, no matter what the team needs for them to play whatever style that they need to get their win. So I'm really happy with this team, and I do expect them to continue to rise.
Yeah, definitely agree. Another team on the rise, they've now tied for first. Technically Cloud9 has the head-to-head being 1-0 against them, but Team Liquid, at the top of the standings now with C9 rocking a 10-2 record. I think people had questions about this team, a couple weeks ago, specifically when they had those two super long games again. I think it was against Immortals and Dignitas. They had those base racy games that, could have honestly gone either way, and people were really starting to question, is this team as good as their record shows when at the time when they were 6-2? And now, sitting at the top of the table with Cloud9 at 10-2, I think people are now starting to recognize that this team is actually a really good team. Core JJ and Jensen, I want to highlight specifically, have really just been the driving force of this team. Jensen, he does play a lot of Azir, like we say, and we want to see him play some more aggressive picks. And when he does, they perform really well. And like we've mentioned before, Core JJ can play anything. He can play the Bard, he can play the Thresh, he can play the Blitz, he can play the Braum. Like, he can do whatever you need. And, I think these two players on Team Liquid are really what's kind of pushing them over the edge right now. And we'll have to see if they can maybe overtake C9 by the end of the split.
Yeah, no, I definitely am very curious to see what this team's going to come out with. I did look up a few stats for them as well because, well, you know me, I love stats. So they are actually second in the league with their goal differential at 15, sitting at 925. I mentioned how the only other positive teams were Cloud9 and Golden Guardians. So I do think that they've looked really good in the early game, but they are also a team, just like Golden Guardians, that is known for having really long games as well. So it's kind of similar when it comes to what these teams need to shore up in order to improve. It's definitely fixing that game time. But when it comes to TL, they are more known for a slower play style, so I don't think that's anything too much to worry about. But I really want to talk about Jensen and Core JJ. These two players have been so good for this team. And Core JJ, we've always said, like, we've always known that he was really good. He recently won the MVP. You could probably remind me about when that was. I know it wasn't too long ago.
I think it
And
was
then, but
spring season 9 when he first came to
there
the
you go.
league.
Yeah, and then the other thing is though Jensen I think has really seen a resurgence in his gameplay. I still prefer to see him play a little bit more aggressive, but even with the slow play style, I think he's been making a lot of great plays. I've said I'm not too huge on Jensen playing Azir. However, his Azir has been pretty good, and so is his TF. So really want to give props to those two players in particular. I think those are the two players that are really carrying this team. Another player that I want to talk about is Broxa, because Broxa is like, I don't know where to put him as far as junglers in the league. Uh, he he had a game this weekend where he was 0-0-0 until the 35-minute mark or something like that, and it just felt like he couldn't get anything done, and that's really not what you want to see out of your jungler.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of this, honestly. Not, I don't want to say seen a lot of this, but Broxa has definitely not been, I think, the player that Team Liquid expected, or maybe, you know, the fans' perception, expected of him when he came to the NALCS. From his games in EU, he was always known as this very scrappy jungler who, kind of just muscles his way into like winning the game. He's known for his Lee Sin. He's great at controlling objectives and playing team fights. Regardless, when he was in EU, he was doing everything. But it kind of seems now over in NA, he plays a lot slower. He plays heavily around mid lane with Jensen. Kind of just making sure that Jensen doesn't die and continues to build whatever CS lead he's able to accrue in lane. But he's definitely not the same Brox that I think that we've seen from EU, and it'll be interesting to see one how the team decides to utilize him going forward, if he's going to be involved in the same role, or if he's going to switch up his playstyle at all. Because like we mentioned, they still have to go get above C9, and I don't think with their game plan of putting Broxa on a slower jungler or making his playstyle very slow, that won't bode well against C9.
Yeah, it just seems like no matter what they've tried with Broxton, nothing's really worked out. And it's not to say he's been awful, but he just hasn't been as impactful as we thought he would be coming over from such a dominating like history when he was playing in Europe. But yeah, definitely interesting. Definitely want to see what he has to offer in the last 3 weeks of the split. Um, but yeah, definitely to me, very, very odd. Anything else on TL before we move on to our next team?
No, I'm good.
So next up on our list, we have Immortals on the rise. Now, Immortals is very difficult to pinpoint as well, um, because we see such crazy things out of this team. I got to talk about Insanity. I love his champion pool. He has played 7 unique champions in 8 games so far since joining the LCS, and like especially when we talked about this last week, I think his Corki packages were crazy. Or now he's playing Karthus, which is like such a go-in style. Like he's really played something that's been fun to watch, and whether it be for better or for worse, it's been really good games. And so like I'm really liking this because when we were seeing the old Immortals roster, we weren't seeing much of anything. The team was losing, and they weren't really making much happen around the map. It didn't feel like they were ever contesting anything, and that identity has totally shifted just with Insanity alone, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. They're sitting currently with a 3-9 record, but I think they could easily have, another 2 wins, putting them almost right up into that sort of 5-6 spot, even 4 spot if they would be at, tied with 5 wins with CLG. But, this team they've basically had a complete resurgence ever since they benched their entire LCS roster for their academy roster, with 3 of the 5 members being on their previous LCS roster. So this team has definitely done a complete 180 since the season started. I think people really had no hope for the original Immortals roster, and people weren't expecting amazing things with this new Immortals roster coming in. But I think people are definitely you know they're thinking that they're performing better than expected, specifically Insanity, as you mentioned. Playing 7 unique champions out of 8 games, having a wide champion pool is really, really important just in professional league in general, because you don't want to have a small champion pool getting banned out in like a 5 game series or something in
Mm-hmm.
playoffs. It's always valuable to have, picks that you can whip out at any moment. But, you know, it's just props to Insanity and props to Immortals overall. I think they've done a great job, working with what they've got after making their roster substitutions.
Yeah, and another little thing about Immortals is that this, like you said, this team is sitting towards the bottom of the standings, but it just seems like none of their players are playing bottom of the standings level of League of Legends. Like specifically with Apollo Hako, we've talked about these guys many times, and people have always said, you know what you're going to get with them. And even though I do think there is some truth to that, I still think they're actually performing a little bit better than that. You know what we're going to get from them kind of thing. I thought they've looked really good. I really liked Apollo's Ash, but I've mentioned that before, and I also really like Hakuho on whipping out the Morgana earlier in the week. I thought that um, I wish they would have played the Morgana in game two actually, but yeah, he's looked really good. The only part of Immortals where I'm a little bit sour, so to speak, would actually be in the jungle with Xmithy. And it's not that I think he's been bad, but I think he's kind of just been he's been okay. You know, I don't think he's been to the level that we've seen him in the past, where he is one of the best junglers in North America. But I do also think that that's a product of him playing on a less talented team. Like we got to remember that before he was playing on Team Liquid not too long ago, and so it's really night and day the kind of players that he's playing with. But overall, I just got to say that this team's looked pretty good, and that's why they're definitely on the rise to me.
Yeah, definitely like you mentioned with Smithy, being on this Immortals roster, he's being asked to do more. And, when you're being asked to do more, you don't have the freedom to do whatever you want like he did on Team Liquid. Basically, he was playing just like he was just being sort of a controller on Team Liquid. He'd be wherever he needed to be for the team. He'd be protecting dives from the enemy or setting up his own dives for his own team, and just having generally really great objective control. But when you aren't playing with as strong players, you are asked to do more. You are asked to be more prevalent in lanes, and that can affect your overall just tempo in the game and your effect on the map.
Yeah. Anything else on this team before we move on to the next?
Nope.
So last up for our teams on the rise is Dignitas, and I don't know about you. I think we're pretty hesitant on putting this team on the rise with how poor their last performance was. However, the 3 games prior, they had their 3 game winning streak. It was a totally different team than the team that we saw start off the season 0-8. So to me, regardless, having a really bad game, I don't think that was enough to put down all of the 3 wins where they looked so much better than their 0-8 start, I guess.
Yeah, pretty interesting this week with them deciding to sub back in Viper for Lorlo. And, I think both of us, we've really been talking up Lorlo these last couple weeks because we've both, we're both of the opinion that he's actually been performing really, really well. So for myself, I was a little bit surprised to hear that they were subbing out Lorlo, but I think Viper played all right. He got his Riven. He got his Riven pick in the first game, performed pretty well on it. But in the second game, as you were mentioning, it was a pretty disaster of a game from Dignitas. They were pretty much giving up anything. If you didn't catch the game, it was basically we haven't actually looked this up, but we're pretty sure that it has to be the least total kills in any professional game anywhere of all time, all regions. Like it has to be. I don't think me personally, the only ever game that I've seen with less kills was, funnily enough, another Dignitas game. I think it was Dignitas Immortals back in like 2017 and had like 10 kills. But like
Yeah,
I don't know, just to not fight in the entire game is just pretty wild to me.
yeah, 4 kills. I can't believe I'm saying this. 4 kills in a game. That is unbelievably bad for a game to watch. That might be one of the worst games, or if not the worst game ever played. But I don't want to dwell on that too much because, like I said, they did play a lot better within recent times up leading up to that game. I want to talk a little bit about Dardoch because he, to me, and take this as a good thing or a bad thing, he has been a coin flip player to me. There are his performances where he comes out and he's got a clear game plan and he looks good in what he's doing. And then there's games where he looks a little bit lost and he's not on the same page as the rest of his teammates. So I'm really confused with Dardoch. I don't know exactly where to put him, but I definitely know that he's not as bad as the 0-8 jungling that they were getting when they had Acadian start off the season. So I do think he's an upgrade, but again, he hasn't been amazing all the time. So I really think he's really coin flippy. And like you mentioned, Lorlo getting subbed out, I can't ever agree with that. Except maybe with the exception of the CLG game. And the reason I say that is, CLG has struggled in the top lane, whether it's Deus or whether it's Ruin. I think that's a lane where you can play a Riven and try to play through top and exploit that. So if they were going to be subbing in a player just for a specific matchup or a specific game, rather, that's where I could see that move making sense. But the fact that they kept him in for the full weekend, I just don't get. I mentioned last week, Lorlo's been great. I think he's leading the league now in KDA for top laners after Licorice died a lot this past weekend. Um, So, anyways, I don't have much more to say on Lorlo. I thought he should be playing. He's not. What can you say about it?
Yeah, I remember when we were watching the games together on Sunday, one thing that you mentioned, which I thought was super interesting, was that, you know, with them subbing back in Viper and getting sort of a quote unquote second chance, that kind of, it makes me wonder a little bit, if Froggen were to ever get a second chance being subbed in again. Because for me personally, I think, they were both obviously underperforming when they originally got subbed out. But to me, I think Viper was underperforming more. So
By far.
definitely a little bit surprising that, you know, if they're giving these players, maybe a quote unquote second chance that, Froggen will either not or will not get one.
Yeah, and with the exception of Phoenix's first game, like his first game was really
Yeah,
really
yeah.
bad, but since then I think he's been okay. There's some times where he pops off. He had a really nice shockwave in a CLG game, but then got caught as well in the same game with times where he shouldn't be getting caught. So a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. Kind of with Dardoch also, kind of coin flippy as well. But to your point, yeah, if Viper deserves another chance, you gotta figure so does Froggen, and so maybe we'll see Froggen soon. Maybe he's not doing well in scrims, or maybe Phoenix is really popping off in scrims. I'm not too sure, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Froggen because we did see Viper. I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't got much more else on this team. Do you have anything else before we move on to our teams that are just chillaxing?
Nope.
Yeah, so next up, we're going to move on to the teams that not exactly rising, not exactly falling, but do still have a fair bit of things to say about these teams. The first up on the list for me is Cloud9. This is a team that was sitting at the top of the standings, and although they did lose a couple of games, we did consider putting them on the uh, in the falling section, but I don't think that them losing their games was a result of them getting worse as much as I do think it was a result of them trying different things and just kind of getting punished for trying different drafts. I don't
Yeah,
know. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah. I think people might be surprised to hear us say that we don't think C9 is falling, but like you said, I think in their 100 Thieves game, they were experimenting a little bit with draft, and I think in the EG game, I think it was actually EG just playing really well. C9 didn't have the greatest game, but to me, it's more props on EG for being able to take it to them. I mentioned Zazel
Agreed.
playing the Alistar, which was really, really good. Goldenglue hit pretty much all his skill shots on Zoe, and when you're hitting your skill shots on Zoe, it's pretty tough to play the game. But you know, uh, we'll definitely have to see. Going forward with C9, we'll have to see this trend of them, I guess, quote unquote, underperforming, and that being losing games. But I still think we're both of the opinion that they're still a very, very strong team, and they are still to be feared, and that's why I think both of us have sort of they're in the just chilling category.
hmm And a couple of things on this team that I want to talk about. One is with the different drafts. Um, I actually thought last week their loss against 100 Thieves. I thought it was a poor draft. I thought that their intentions were to try something different, and the draft was still very poor, anyways. This week I thought they were trying something different, but I thought the draft was still good. And to your point, EG just played well. So I don't want to take anything away from EG. I thought they looked really really good in the game that they played against Cloud9, and I think Cloud9 is doing something that they're more so playing to the advantage of playing in North America. And so what I mean by that is there's been so much talk that NA is the worst region to play in for all the good teams because you don't get much practice. And while I definitely do agree with that, there are some positives here. And I think C9 is playing with those positives on their side. And so the fact that they're able to try out different stuff in the middle of their season is the benefit of playing in North America because they can do something like this and still feel like they have a lot of confidence that they will make it to Worlds. Where if you were to do this in China or in Europe, there's a good chance you don't make it to Worlds. And so maybe you got to try all these different comps and try to master a bunch of different styles, but you don't even get to showcase them when it comes to Worlds. So I think Cloud9 is just playing to their advantages of playing in North America. And so that's why I think we're seeing a little bit of a different style out of them. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about with Cloud9 is Blabber. It's starting to get banned out quite a bit. And it makes me wonder if he's not going to get the MVP anymore because if you ban out someone, if you take out their best champions from them game after game, it's really hard for them to perform at the same level as the champions that they were popping off in the weeks prior. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like you said, getting banned out in the majority of the games that they're playing, his Olaf and his Lee Sin, two of his very aggressive picks. And for the first half of the LCS, Cloud9 was this super super aggressive team that would always fight you, always take it to you, and they've kind of, maybe it's not been by their choice to slow down, but in terms of what they're drafting, but Cloud9 playing a lot slower, experimenting with drafts. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I think it's a bit of a close race now for the MVP in terms of you could I would guess the top two right now are Blabber and Core JJ for myself. But it's
Yep.
definitely hard to perform at your best when you basically can't because your best champions are getting banned out. It's pretty difficult to ban out support, specifically Core JJ, who can play everything. But it's a bit weirder with jungle because your champion does affect your play style and the way that you play. So it's very interesting, and we'll have to see what how Blabber continues to how he sort of continues to perform over these last couple weeks.
Yeah, and what it's going to do, in my opinion, I don't think it will change Cloud9's play style per se. What I think it will do is it will force them to win harder in other lanes. So maybe if they can't get those power picks for their jungler, well, maybe they can give it to Sven in the bot lane or Licorice in the top lane. It doesn't seem like a Niski kind of thing to me, although they did give him Syndra, who's a very good pick. I liked them putting Sven on the Kalista. I think that's a pick where you can really see C9's bot lane start to shine, whereas earlier in the season they were playing more scaling stuff. So I think that's what we're going to start to see out of Cloud9. I expect to see a little bit more Callista, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I don't think it's going to change their aggression. I think it's just going to move their aggression around to different roles on the team.
I agree.
Moving on, we have FlyQuest, another team that's just chilling. This team could have been put falling, I think, but ultimately, I don't think that this team is falling. I think that we're going to see this team kind of sit around their level right now of play. I don't think that they're going to fall out of playoffs, nor do I think that they're going to catch up to Cloud9 or Team Liquid. I expect this team to kind of chill and sit the same. What are your thoughts on FlyQuest?
Yeah, I mean they had a good week. I think they had a really clean, decisive win against TSM, and then a pretty decisive loss to C9. C9 sort of uh, returning to their former selves, specifically in that FlyQuest game. But as you said, I think we were wondering if we were going to put this team on the decline. But they had a really clean game against TSM. They really they basically just created a huge advantage through like the first 5 minutes of the game, which really allowed to snowball their lead, and they snowballed it pretty well. So definitely a just chilling team for me. They have, they've been a really interesting team. They put Mash in for a little bit, but now they have Turtle coming back in, and it's really interesting. I think this team is definitely um, kind of like Cloud9, I guess, experimenting a little bit. They're putting Ignar on Pantheon a lot now, which I find super interesting. It's not a super like playmaking champion, like not as opposed to his Rakan. Ignar. Rakan is his best champion, and I think putting him on Pantheon, it's been a little weird to me. It's more of this aggressive support pick that you can sort of sideline a little bit with. You know, Basically your entire kit is revolved around your ultimate and your W. So I don't know. It's been a bit weird for me seeing Ignar on this Pantheon support, but I don't know. It's hard to tell. I feel like with a lot of these teams where we don't know, it's kind of we're just waiting to see how they'll perform, in these coming weeks. So I'm not really sure where to put FlyQuest in for me. That's kind of why I have them in the just chilling.
It's funny that you say that because I had the same thing written down in my notes here that like I wasn't too sure what to think about Ignar on his Pantheon. I would much prefer him on the Rakan if it's available, but I mean you can't always get what you want. Yeah, I'm not too sure what to think about the Pantheon pick either. And I think one of the reasons it's so difficult to put FlyQuest on the rise or on the fall is because I don't think we learned much from them this. They lost to Cloud9, which is like that's something that is expected to happen. And then their game against TSM was just running it down, and they were up the 2K gold at 5 minutes. So like that's why I feel like this team is just in the just chilling section because we didn't learn too much about them. One other thing that I want to talk about real quick on FlyQuest because I don't have too much on them, but I want to talk about Wild Turtle coming back. So this was something that I expected to see last week. However, we did get to see Turtle come back, and you got to question what the move with Mash was all about because I didn't see anything too impressive out of Mash. Um, with that being said, Turtle comes back. He looks okay, like nothing amazing, nothing bad. Pretty much what you would expect out of Turtle. But Wild Turtle got his 1500th kill this weekend, and so that was something, another milestone. He's only the second player in the LCS to do that in the regular season. So I believe the only other one is Double Lift, and then Bjergsen probably also has 1,500 kills, but I believe a lot of those are in playoffs. So only the second player in the regular season to have 1,500 kills. So just a little congratulations to Wild Turtle on that milestone, and it just goes to show how long he has been playing in this league.
Yeah, definitely, back to what you were talking about with Mash versus Turtle. I think with Mash, it was sort of we got like a one good play and then two bad plays, or two good plays and then three bad plays. It was kind of interesting. It was a bit of an experiment with Mash, being slotted in. I think he had more bad than good, honestly, and I'm kind of glad to see Turtle back in there. I was surprised originally when they were going to sub out Wild Turtle, because I think at the time they were either 3-1 or 2-2. I think they were 3-1 actually, and then you know a 3-1 team making substitutions is pretty surprising. But I'm glad to see Turtle back in there. I'm glad to see him to get his 1500. What the hell? How do you say that? 1500th kill?
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah, congrats to him. But it definitely we'll have to see how they perform moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm very much with you. Like, it wasn't a move that we thought was going to happen when they made the move to Mash. It wasn't like, everything was, going downhill or anything like that. So yeah, very much out of the blue, but I mean, it's good to see him back. Um Anything else before we move on to the next team that is in the just chillin' range?
Nah, that's good.
So next up we have 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves, a team you could have maybe put on the rise after having such a good 2-0 weekend last weekend. However, they kind of came back down to reality again this weekend. Um, I don't really have too much to say on 100 Thieves. I'm really happy that Someday's getting more options to play some carries. We saw that specifically last week. We saw that. Um, and I think it's something that's going to put this team in the right direction. However, I still think they have too much holding them back. Um, we saw Contracts get punished a fair bit this weekend with his aggression. We saw Ryoma getting caught out again. I remember saying this. I don't know if it was to you or to Scott or someone, but when we were watching the game, I said, "Watch, Ryoma is going to randomly get picked off," and sure enough, he randomly got picked off like 3 minutes later. So like, it was something that wasn't too much of a surprise to me. It wasn't out of the blue. We saw it coming, and of course, it did happen. And the other thing is, Poom also kind of had a rough weekend getting caught as well. It just seems to me like that has been the biggest thing with 100 Thieves is players getting randomly caught out. And whether it be Stunt Medios or whether it be Ryoma or Poom, like they just seem to get caught at random times, and they end up throwing the game away or throwing a drag away, which leads to throwing the game away. It's such a weird thing with this team.
Yeah, I think getting caught a lot can, be somewhat attributed to their inexperience. I mean, they still, in terms of recency in the LCS, like they're a pretty young team. They have, Contracts, who recently has been out of the LCS for the past little while. Poom, a completely fresh new player, and Ryoma, another fairly new player to the LCS. And we are seeing some fundamental mistakes coming out from 100 Thieves, and that is very problematic, especially at the professional level, because you need to have these fundamentals down because they're just the basics of the game. And as you mentioned, it's they've been a little uncoordinated. They've been getting caught a lot, and it's really hard to judge this team, like you said, with we could have considered this team a team on the rise after their 2-0 weekend previously. But they had two poor games, honestly, this weekend, and that's kind of why we're still a bit unsure about this team.
Yep.
Specifically,
Uh,
I want to say with Poom and Contracts.
yeah, definitely. It's still a lot to learn from this team, and specifically a lot to learn from Poom just being such a brand new player. I don't really have too much else to say on 100 Thieves, honestly. I'm really happy that they got their 2-0 week last week, but as expected to me, I did think that they were going to lose their games this weekend. And sure enough, they did. Anything else for you to say on this team?
No, I think we can move on to our last team, Evil Geniuses. We touched on them a little bit in our first segment of the show, just talking about their roster changes and what we should expect from them moving forward with Goldenglue, potentially staying on the starting, potentially continuing to start in the mid lane and maybe getting a new contract. But yeah, as we were mentioning this week, they had a very rough and kind of messy game against Team Liquid, and then had played a really well game, played a really clean game against C9. So again, there's not too much to talk about. We've talked about it a lot already, but this team's sitting at 6-6 right now in the LCS, like straight up middle of the pack. They're going to be fighting for potentially, a top three spot as, the third and the seventh seeds are all 2 games apart, either being
Yeah, they're
seven
very
and
close.
five or 5-7. So it's going to be a tight race, get these seedings and playoffs, and we'll have to see. I think the main question with this team is what their roster is going to be like next week and for the rest of the season. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, like you said, not too much to say on this team. We talked about how Zazel looked really good. I really liked his flanks on Alistair. I don't know if he'll be getting that too much more because that's definitely one of his better champions, if not the best. And then we also talked about Golden Glue. It seemed like he was the reason that they lost in the first one, but also one of the main reasons they won in the second one. But one thing we didn't touch on earlier that I did want to touch on was Hooney being subbed in and just his overall performance. I did not think Hooney looked good in either game, to be honest. He did end up scaling later on in the game against Cloud9 with his gangplank, but he actually got dumpstered in lane, and he also got camped for in the first game. Like Senscairn was camping his lane, and then he didn't do much with it. So I'm still not really impressed with Hooney. I've said for a long time Hooney has fallen off, and I don't think we're gonna see old Hooney come back. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not too hyped about this new roster. I think he's just a liability in the top lane. Plays hella aggressive, and he doesn't get too much for your team. So, yeah, that's the only other thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to EG is I don't think that this pick is that great. I think he's being overrated, and I think he's going to be their top laner next year, and I think that we're going to see this team suffer because of that. But I mean, we have to wait quite a while to see all of that.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned just there that their game plan in that first game against TL was kind of weird. He was playing Karma top in their first game against Team Liquid, and he was kind of getting camped for. Sven Skaren spent the majority of the time on the top side of the map, ganking for Hooney, blowing enemy flashes. He got 2 kills, I believe, but he was playing the sort of supportive Karma top lane, and I remember when we were watching the game, it was just I don't know. It was a weird look from EG, and I didn't really think their game plan made sense in terms of camping for the support Karma top.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I don't think that that's ever going to win you too many games. But yeah, not much else for me to talk about on EG. Anything else before we move on to our teams that are starting to slide a little bit?
No, we'll get into those ones now.
All right, so the first we only have two teams left, and these are two classic organizations in CLG and TSM. Let's start off with CLG because this was a team that I have been saying for many weeks that this team will decline, and sure enough, they declined. And I tweeted out like they showed us who we thought they were, and it's true. Okay, this team has looked bad in their wins, they looked bad in their losses, and they looked bad this past weekend. So. I we did whip up a few stats just to back up how the poor performance surrounding CLG. They're last in the league with 32.3% drag percentage. They are last in the league in first tower and in first blood, both with 33.3%. So it's not just like, oh, is this team, they have a few wins. Maybe they're not that bad. No, their stats are definitely indicating they're a pretty bad team. And I think the biggest thing for me is their top side of the map. I don't think it matters if it's Deus. I don't think it matters if it's Ruin. I think their top lane is bad. And I think that the same thing is true in the jungle. I don't think Wiggly is getting too much done. It never seems like they have an answer. If one jungler is doing one thing on the other side of the map, it seems to always be more productive than whatever Wiggly is doing. And so I think this team's going to continue to struggle until they clear up or change up the top side of the map.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, I think we're both sort of in agreement with that. The record, I think, is really deceptive of the actual skill level of this team. I mentioned in a previous episode, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but, you know, 4 of their wins that they picked up at the start of the split were against the pre-roster swapped Immortals, the pre-roster swapped Dignitas, the pre-roster swapped 100 Thieves, and the slumping Golden Guardians at the time at the start of the season. So, you know, it's really their record is not like they can be a 5-7 team, and sure it's 5-7 on the standings, but this team is not a 5-7 team. Honestly, if you were to replay all the games, they'd have 1 win. Honestly, they'd have one, maybe even 0 wins, and I've really have not been impressed with their team. As you're mentioning, their top side of the map is really, really weak. They don't get a lot done. Wiggly, as you said, it usually always happens to be if enemy jungler is doing something on the opposite side of the map, Wiggly is just not getting enough done to make whatever has happened on the opposite side of the map worth it it's basically always a neutral negative with Wiggly in terms of what he's doing around the map. So, you know, for me personally, I'm expecting big changes out of this organization for coming into the next season, and I think that's honestly where they should be looking at this point. I think they have their own idea that, maybe we can make a run in playoffs or something like that. We've previously talked about Weldon and his sort of delusional mindset that they can, scrap with the teams at the top of the table, but the way they're performing now, there's no chance of that actually happening.
Yeah, and so I actually to talk a little bit more on their management side, I don't think it stops with just Weldon, because I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but when they were 3-1, I believe, um, the CLG GM was in chat for Hotline League one week, and there were so many takes, mine included, that were saying CLG is a bad team, and he took it upon himself to put his own take in the Discord channel, saying that CLG can only beat bad teams, obviously in a sarcastic manner. And so he got pulled on the show, and he was able to go on about how their team is better than people are giving them credit
Nope,
for, and that they're not getting credit for all their wins. And guess what? They're bad.
they're
And
bad.
so I don't think that it stops with just Weldon being delusional. It seems like all of their management is also delusional about how good their own team is. And so that's why if you see me smirk a little bit at CLG doing bad, it's not because I hate the organization, but it's because their management is so lost and this team needs to change, and they refuse to change and to accept that they're bad. And so that's why it makes me so happy to see this team do bad. Not for the players. I actually really like a lot of the players on this team, but as far as CLG as a brand and as a team in this league, something needs to change. And so I'm glad that their game performance is proving that something needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to bring up one. It's not really off topic. It's still about CLG, but remember when we were watching the broadcast just this past weekend, they had Pobelter rated as the fifth best mid laner, and I thought that was super interesting. One, because I didn't think he was the fifth best mid laner, and two, I think in terms of them ranking him as the fifth best mid laner, it's he's obviously not performing to the level of CLG. I think he's actually been performing decently, but I think
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of shining because the rest of CLG is failing. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. And I don't know if all three analysts put
I
Pobelter
think two
five,
of them
but
had it five.
okay. Yeah. Regardless, I don't think he has any business being in the 5 spot, which is a little bit
Yeah.
harsh, but I think it's a little bit true. Anything before we move on to our last team, Team Solo Mid?
Yeah, talent suppression machine.
Okay, so let's get into the talent suppression machine. I don't know where to start with this one. I got a few things to say, so I'll let you start off with this one.
Yeah, I mean, they had a 1-1 week this week, a really messy win against 100 Thieves. It just seemed like in that game, this was a Friday night game, but it kind of was just like they just looked like two bad teams, and one of the teams had to win the game. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't impressed with TSM at all. I wasn't impressed by 100 Thieves, and TSM kind of just won the game, and it was like, okay, they won. And as we mentioned before, they got wrecked in their FlyQuest game. Spica looked really, really bad and really, really lost. Didn't really know what to do when things went wrong in the early game. And honestly, same kind of thing in the 100T game. He was inting a little bit. Had a really poor week. Of what I'm sort of seeing from Spica is when things start to fall apart, it really falls apart for TSM, specifically in the
Mm,
jungle. But I think what Spica does well is playing off of leads and playing around the strong points of the map. But when either there's no strong points around the map or he doesn't exactly know what to be doing, it really seems like he's super, super lost in terms of where to be. Um, his timings on like the enemy team and where they're going to be and where they're placing vision and where to get timers that he can get his own vision for his own team. So, and it's really interesting. I think we're starting to see, a little bit of the inexperience from Spica, and it was really detrimental this week.
yeah, no, definitely a little bit disappointed with his gameplay. I still think that this will be. I think Spica will be a really good player next year. I've said this before in past episodes. I think this is a player that's going to get better with time, especially playing with these kinds of veterans. But right now, we're not seeing all the veterans playing at the level that we would expect them to play at. I don't think Doublelift has been bad, but he hasn't been Doublelift. Like you used to be able to put all your resources in Doublelift and he'd win you a championship. It doesn't seem to be the case anymore. However, I do want to highlight Bjergsen because I do think he is the kind of guy that can take the resources and carry a game. he has looked pretty good. So I think there's some good and some bad going on with TSM. However, I think there's just too much bad with this team, and that's why we had to put them falling or on the decline. Mainly, we talked about Spica, but another thing is mainly Broken Blade. He has not been the top laner or that we've come to expect. And I did a little bit of digging in some of the stats, and so just looking alone, just at his CSD at 15, he's a -6, which doesn't sound terrible, but he does get a lot of carry champions every now and I should say not a lot. He gets some every now and then, and so I don't think he should be at that negative number. And the players that he's ahead of, listen to the names that he's ahead of as far as CSD at 15. He's ahead of Lorlo and Alorum, two definite role player champions that are supposed to struggle in lane. And then he's ahead of Viper, probably one of the worst top laners performing the split. And then Huni and Deus, both pretty bad players without a lot of games
Games,
played this
yeah.
split. So the players that he's ahead of are definitely bottom tier top laners as far as CSD at 15 is concerned. And so he's trailing everybody else in the league in that, which is not something that we would come to expect out of Broken Blade.
Yeah, definitely has been underperforming this split. We saw, when Broken Blade entered the scene in NALCS, he was super carry player. Was performing really, really well. Bruce, you could argue, was the best performing player on TSM last year in terms of overall performance. But yeah, definitely underperforming this split. One thing that we haven't touched on yet is Treats. He had his first LCS games this weekend. I think he's a highly touted academy player, um, and rightly so. I think he's been at the top of academy for the better part of 2 years now. So I think I was really glad to see him finally get an LCS shot. I think 2 episodes ago when we were talking about potential academy players that could make an impact in the league, two of the players that I highlighted were TSM Academy Support Treats and C9 Academy Support Diamond. So it was I was glad to see Treats in this weekend. How did you feel about his performance?
Yeah, I thought he looked good, as good as he could. Let's put it that way, because we
Yeah.
know that they were absolutely running it down in their FlyQuest game, and I thought that he looked okay in their 100 Thieves game. They got a kill in bot lane, a solo kill, so to speak. But yeah, not enough information yet to have a real good opinion on him. But I did want to mention Treats and talk about how in an interview with Travis Gafford, he actually brought up that he thinks that within a few weeks he'll be able to call himself a top 3 support in the league. So definitely a player with a lot of confidence. And I think this is really interesting because not a lot of players coming into the league have that level of confidence, especially when they don't have a lot of experience. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that confidence. However, I think it's very much, if he performs really well, I think he'll get the praise and say, you know what, maybe you are a top 3 player in your role. But if he doesn't, I think that he really should come under the limelight there and really be kind of maybe shamed is a little bit extreme, but kind of called out if he's not playing to that level, which is something that you get. That's just something that we've always seen in LCS. If you're going to talk a lot and say how good you are, you need to back it up. And so I think that that's something he's going to have to do in the next few weeks. And so I'm really excited to watch him specifically when watching TSM games, because I don't think he will be a top 3 support. But again, I don't have the information to say that he's not yet. So really looking forward to seeing him play. But I don't think he was enough this weekend to stop his team from being in the decline section.
Yeah, I can appreciate though that he's kind of putting himself out there, that he believes in himself, and props to him for doing that.
Yeah, and so that's going to wrap up all of our teams for this week as far as the rising, the following, and the just chilling section. Next up, we have our classic pop off and bean soup section of our episode. So I'll let you start off with popping off. Who did you have popping off this week?
I got Core JJ this week. We kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier in the show when we were talking about Cloud9 and Blabber potentially being the MVP. But myself, I think Core JJ is actually an MVP candidate this split. His Bard is world class. I don't think I've seen any other Bard play in the world so far that I think would compare to that. Um, as we've mentioned before, he basically has a champion ocean. He can play whatever you need him to play, and he had a really good week. He's been having really great Bard ultimates, having really good uh, double stuns on the Bard Q, and he kind of helped innovate this little W level 1 start where you place like 2 or 3 shrines mid lane and then place one for your jungler, and you know every all the bards are doing that now, so he's popping off.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that Corey JJ has been popping off, and I do think you're right in saying that he is an MVP candidate. I think that he has really closed the gap between him and Blabber in the last couple of weeks. He's definitely just a playmaker. Like that team is not the same without him, so I do think that he's in the MVP candidate talks. I am going to give my pop off award to Golden Glue, however, though. Despite having a pretty rough game on Friday, this guy has not been playing for some time now. He was ready to accept a coaching job, and he said that he thought he would be coaching. He gets subbed in, put on a very weird contract, 7 days, and he pops off against his old team in Cloud9. What more can you ask for out of Golden Glue for that? His Zoe bubbles, I've mentioned it earlier, were great, and just one of the reasons, if not the biggest reason, that they were able to take down the best team in the league. And so, despite maybe him not having the best weekend we've seen, this is a guy that wasn't playing anywhere and just got put on a random team and had a really good game against a really good team. So I definitely was really happy with his performance. And so, Golden Glue, you're popping off this week. Good for him.
Yeah, Swole Bro's too good. Dopamine levels too high.
Yeah, true. We got the Swole Bros back.
Yeah.
Next up, we got Bean Soup. Who was disappointing you this weekend? Who do you got for Bean Soup?
I kind of mentioned it just a few minutes ago, but I got Spica as the bean soup this week. Kind of just like I was talking about, he seemed pretty lost, this week in terms of the game state and knowing what to do when his team is falling behind. And, I think in a lot of the TSM wins, they're able to get, not necessarily an early game lead, but they go even in the early game and usually can through mid lane or through top lane when Broken Blade is not playing poorly, but they can sort of accrue a nice little mid game lead. And Speak is usually able to play pretty well around that. He has pretty good Baron control, but you know, definitely seemed a little bit lost this week, and that's why I had to give him the bean soup.
Yeah, it was sad to see him go from being talked as one of the more improving players in the league to having such a bad performance. I definitely think he can bounce back, but definitely a reasonable Bean Soup award. I'm totally right there with you. I did go a little bit different this week. I had to give my Bean Soup award to 5 different players. Um, Dignitas versus Golden Guardians game. That game was so shit, man. That's I think that I don't think it was so much on the Golden Guardians players. I don't want people to think that I'm giving it to all 10 players that were in the game, but that was probably the worst game of League of Legends I've ever seen, and I think that was really on Dignitas's shoulders to take the blame for that one. And so, Dignitas, you're bean soup this week. That was just absolute garbage to watch, and I don't think we will see it again. But you got to get called out for that one. Any
Yeah,
thoughts on that one?
yeah, it's kind of hard from like the Golden Guardians side. Like they were just doing like Dignitas was just giving everything up, and Golden Guardians was taking it. Like Golden Guardians took the first two drags in that game, and I think Azale was mentioning on the broadcast, they were gonna give third Drake because Kog'Maw hadn't yet reached his 2 item power spike of Blade of the Rune King Runan. So they gave up third Drake, and then they gave up Ocean Soul, and then they gave up Baron, and then they gave up triple inhib, and they gave up their base, and Dignitas just didn't fight them. So I don't like. I don't think you shouldn't give Golden Guardians any flame because they were just doing their jobs. Like they were just going out there winning the game. Like if they're not gonna fight you, they're not gonna fight you. So
Yeah,
I don't
who's going
know.
to complain about getting free objectives, right? It's
Yeah,
really, like I said, like you said, it's really not on Golden Guardians. This is a Bean Soup Award for Team Dignitas for one of the worst games we've ever seen. Moving
yeah. There
on
is.
to
Oh,
our.
sorry. I was
Oh,
just
go
gonna.
ahead.
I was just gonna say there was some pretty funny Twitter content out of all like the Golden Guardians
Yes.
players after. It was really funny.
Yes, there was some
Demo-
great tweets, some great videos. Like, they deservedly so, okay? They deserve to be roasted for that.
yes, I remember. I don't remember who tweeted it, but somebody was like, "Co-op VI would have been harder that game," and
I think that
Demont,
was Hanser.
yeah, and then Demonte tweeted at Dignitas, said "miss me," and then like he was, oh man, like Demonte was like, then he like followed that tweet up because I think Dignitas replied or something like that, and then like Demonte had like more likes than like the whole Dignitas's org's Twitter, and like oh man, it was hilarious.
Yeah, definitely an interesting game, and not for good reasons. But definitely loved all the Twitter interactions that followed. Moving on, we're gonna move on to the bet section this week. We got some interesting lines here for bets. I definitely want to know your thoughts on what teams you think are worthy of taking this week. Who do you got?
Yeah, your face is getting covered. I'm pulling them up now,
Yeah,
but
no problem.
I don't know. it's there's not to me there's not any ones that stick out like in terms of like really good value. The one that I would like to point out because I think I'm a fan of the team is the Golden Guardians versus FlyQuest. You know, to me, it's a little more of a coin flip in terms of who's gonna win that game. I think I would attribute that to overall team skill level and record. You know, both these teams sitting at 6-6, but Golden Guardians getting 60 more cents than FlyQuest. So I got my faith in Golden Guardians. So maybe look out for that one.
Yeah, I knew that you were going to pick that, and I don't think it's a bad pick. I think it's actually a really good pick. I think these teams are a lot more even than what the odds are giving credit for, and I can't do it because clearly I'm cheering for FlyQuest in that one. And even
Hmm.
though I actually do think FlyQuest is the better team, I don't think that there's that much of a disparity in this game. I think it's definitely a coin toss, and so I think the odds are great for Golden Guardians. If anybody's looking to take a bet, I think that's a very good one. Another one that I think is very good, let me find it on here. It is the Dignitas game. Dignitas versus Evil Geniuses. We saw Evil Genius beat Cloud9, but let's not have too short of a memory. They also got dumpstered on when TL the game before, and this team is not a team that's been playing together very long. I think there's going to be a lot of inconsistencies. And minus the one game where Dignitas looked pretty bad against Golden Guardians, they had 3 games where they looked good before that. And so I don't think that that is by any means a solid lock. And Dignitas is getting 3.5 on that dollar bet. That to me is great odds. I think that if you're feeling a little bit risky, you could even parlay that with the Golden Guardians one and get a pretty good payout, depending on how much you want to wager on that. But those to me were the two standout bets. I think that there's a lot of chances for some long shots or for some upsets, let's say, and you can really make some bank this weekend on those.
Hmm. Moving on to our picks and predictions for this upcoming week, week 7. Let me just pull them up here. They should be on screen now. First game on Friday, we got EG versus Immortals. Well, as you were mentioning, we'll kind of have to see what the EG roster is going to look like, but I'm still going to go with EG on this one. I know we've really been talking up Immortals in terms of Insanity and Alorum and their champ pools, but I'm going to side with EG on this one, but I do think it's close.
Yeah, this one I think is really close as well. Actually, something I probably should have mentioned in the odds because I'm pretty sure Immortals was getting nearly three to
I think
one
it was
odds. I think they were getting 2.8.
2.75 or something like
Okay,
that.
so it has
Yeah.
been fluctuating all day. I've noticed. I was actually able to take this pick last week. I think I got them in at 2.9. So I did take Immortals on this one, and I do want to take an upset. So I think this is going to be one of my upset games that I'm going to go with here. I'm going to take Immortals. I definitely do think EG has a chance to win this game. I don't think there's no by no means do I think Immortals is the favorite. But I like what I've seen out of Immortals lately. I just mentioned how I think EG's a little bit shaky. We don't know exactly what to expect out of them, and their team hasn't been playing together for too long. So I'm going to go with the upset and go with Immortals on this.
Moving on, second game on Friday, we got Team Liquid versus FlyQuest. As you were mentioning, Team Liquid, team on the rise. Tied with Cloud9 in the standings. I'm gonna go TL on this one. I remember in the previous TL FlyQuest game in the first half of the round robin, I think I remember it was a close-ish game, but I'm gonna
That
go
was
with
the game. Sorry to interrupt you. That was
yeah.
the game where FlyQuest was winning and Mash inted over the
Oh
Baron
yeah,
pit
yeah,
with
yeah,
Ezreal.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I remember it was a close game. But I'm gonna go with Team
Yes, it
Liquid on
was.
this one. I think Team Liquid's really been performing well in these last 2 weeks specifically, and I think off the backs of Jensen and Core JJ, they will get it done.
Yeah, I'm so hesitant to take my boys FlyQuest on this one, but I will. I will take FlyQuest. I'm going to take another upset. I still think this team is good. I just need a little bit more proof before I can start yelling it from the rooftops. I think FlyQuest is good. I hope to see them perform. Definitely a little bit nervous for this one because I do think TL has started to look better. But I am going to go with the upset on this one as well. FlyQuest for me. Let's go FlyQuest.
All right, good to see some upsets. But first game on Saturday, we got 100 Thieves versus CLG. Honestly, I'm not too sure where to go with this one. I think it's kind of a coin flip, and
You got a coin? Yeah.
we got a coin flip right here. So I'm gonna go 100 Thieves.
Oh,
No,
God.
no, like there's no reasoning.
I could look at this game for probably like 20 minutes and still not have my mind made up on who I think is going to win this. I think that as far as the early game goes, I give it to 100 Thieves. as far as getting randomly caught out and throwing the game, I also give that to 100 Thieves. So I don't know what to think. Uh, I don't think CLG will just continue to lose the rest of their games. So I'm gonna differ with you on this one as well. I'm going to go CLG. I do it hesitantly, but
Wow.
yeah, I don't got a lot of reasoning. We're gonna see some disparity in the picks this week. So that's a good silver lining. CLG for me. Next.
All right, next game we got TSM and Dignitas. I'm gonna go TSM on this one. I think they'll make some improvements, coming up for this next week of LCS. And to me, they outclassed Dignitas, so I'm gonna go TSM.
I'm gonna go with Dig on this one. Just kidding. Just
Okay,
kidding. I can't.
dude.
I
I was
can't
gonna
do.
say, I was gonna say, we're gonna have like 5 upsets in a row because I think people can infer how this FlyQuest Golden Guardians is gonna go.
I will be cheering for Dignitas in this game, however, because I do want to see them have a little bit of a resurgence, and I
I
do
always
think that
like seeing
the
TSM
team is
lose,
good.
so I'm
Yeah,
good with that.
but I do think TSM is better than they've been playing. I know we said they were on the decline, but it's time for them to put a stop to that. I'm gonna take TSM in this one. I think they'll have a little bit of a bounce back weekend.
Yeah, next game we got FlyQuest versus Golden Guardians, and like I said, I think people can kind of infer how this one's gonna go. I got Golden Guardians on this one because I like me some Golden Guardians.
And I got FlyQuest. Yeah, this one I don't think it's too hard for any of the people listening to figure out which picks we're going with on this one. I do think Golden Guardians is good, and I'm happy to see them on the rise. I just think FlyQuest is a little bit better, and I'm a little bit happier to see them if they were to go on the rise. So, not much else to say. I like both of these teams. Should be a really good game. It's not our game of the week, but it's definitely a candidate for one for me specifically.
Mm.
FlyQuest for me though.
Then last game on Saturday we got Immortals versus C9. I got C9. Not much to say.
Yeah,
Okay, I got one thing to say. I hope that Immortals gives us something spicy in the draft in this game.
and that's totally reasonable with what we've seen out of Alorum and Insanity. These two guys are picking some whack shit, man, and I mean whack in the best way. They're very difficult to predict who they're going to play, and so I think that it's going to be really fun. I want to talk about I am taking Cloud9, but I do also want to remember that the last time these two teams played each other, Cloud9
Oh,
destroyed them.
yeah.
They absolutely destroyed them. But I think that was either the first game or the first weekend that Immortals was playing as a roster. So, yeah, I don't want to harp on Immortals too much. They were practicing against a bunch of academy teams. Their first weekend in the LCS, they got to play against probably the best team we've seen in North America in maybe ever. So, but yeah, nice to see a rematch. Give Immortals another chance, and maybe they can put up a better fight this time.
Yeah, I think it was the second game that they played, but it was the first weekend that it was the new roster. But
Yeah,
first
we
game,
both got Cloud9 on that one.
yeah,
Though.
yeah. First game on Sunday, we got Dignitas versus EG. I'm gonna go EG on this one. Kind of a bit of a similar situation as in the Immortals and EG game happening on the Friday. Dignitas, a team sort of on the rise, and a bit of confusion in terms of what this EG roster might look like next week, or for even that going forward. But I'm gonna go EG on this one. But like I said before, it's close.
So I'm gonna go with EG on this one as well. But like I mentioned before, there were some really good odds on Dignitas, so I did take Dignitas. I took the bait rather at the 3.5 to 1 odds. Not too much to say. I think both of these teams are pretty good. I think they're like middle of the pack teams, but I think EG is just a little bit better with Dignitas kind of being coin flippy in the mid jungle area. And I know that's EG's also kind of been that as well. But regardless, I think EG's just a little bit better. So EG for me.
Yeah, and then next up we got our match of the week, the battle for first place, C9
Match
versus
of the
Team
week,
Liquid.
baby.
Yeah, this
I
one's should be a good game. Definitely a banger. Has banger potential.
Yeah, so I really hope this is a battle for first place because, as I said earlier, I took FlyQuest over TL on the Friday night game. It would be a little bit. So I want FlyQuest to win, but I would be a little disappointed if the C9 TL game doesn't mean as much. I am gonna take C9. I think that this is like the we're not fucking around anymore game. If you're Cloud9, this is like they really want to win this game, and so I don't think you're gonna see any huge surprises in the draft, unless of course they like heavily target ban someone like teams have been doing against Blabber. I don't think we'll see anything too wacky. Should be a really good game. That game is at 5 p.m. EST on Sunday. For those wondering when that game is, if there's a game to catch this weekend, that's going to be a really good one to catch. That's why that's our game of the week. But I think we're both going C9 on that one.
Yeah, I'm going C9. I'm definitely really interested to see how both teams sort of attack draft phase. If Team Liquid is going to take this approach that other teams are taking in terms of banning out Blabber's Olaf and his Lee Sin. But if I have this correct, they're actually playing on blue side. Uh, I don't know. Wait, is that indicative of like the logos of who's on blue side and who's on red side?
I'm not sure exactly how that works. I believe the team on the left is the blue side team. Not sure.
What did I say? Did I see TL was blue side? I thought they were blue side in their last C9 TL game. Okay, nonetheless, I really want to see how the draft plays out in terms of how TL attacks C9's champ pools, and by that I mean banning out potentially the Blabber's Olaf and the Lee Sin, and or how C9 sort of attacks either Jensen or Core JJ's champ pool in terms of the Azir, the TF, the LeBlanc, the Bard, the Braum, I think, I want to see from C9 because I'm a C9 fan and I'm picking C9 in this one. I want to see from C9, getting an advantageous matchup for Niski. I don't want to see Niski on a super aggressive pick and giving Jensen maybe his Azir or his LeBlanc or his TF and his super, I think those are his three comfort champions. I want to see Jensen on something new and C9 kind of throwing him off a little bit because I think Jensen is definitely TL's, him and Core J are their two best performing players, but Jensen obviously doing the majority of the carrying because that's the position he plays.
So
But
I'm actually a little bit differing opinion than you on that one a little bit. As far as Jensen on Azir, I think that that is a champion that is slow enough for Cloud9 to execute the gameplay they want to, because they want to play fast and fight a lot early, and I don't think Azir is too good with that. So I actually think that Cloud9 is going to be more than happy to give him the Azir, and I think TL is going to be more than happy to take it. So I do think there's a really good chance that we see Jensen on Azir this weekend.
yeah, just my reasoning for that is one, in the previous Cloud9 versus TL game, we saw a little bit more of an aggressive early game. I think that Brox was playing Lee Sin in that game, and they had Jensen on the Azir in that game as well. But TL played a little bit of a slower. They gained a little bit of a lead in the early game, but really slowed it down in the mid game. But what I don't want to see from Cloud9 is, recently we've seen their early games be a little bit weaker, and if that trend were to continue, I don't want to see them give over late game power picks over to Team Liquid.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, but match of the week, you definitely got to catch this one if you're only gonna watch a couple games. But third game on Sunday, we got CLG versus TSM. I got TSM on this one. We both think CLG's bad, and like we said, I think I'm expecting improvements out of TSM.
You know what's so sad about this matchup for me? The last time these two teams played is when they were both sitting around the same record. I think they were both 4-2. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
I
they were
think
around there.
that's
And
correct.
remember, it was being hyped up as maybe they could bring the rivalry back as long as these two teams start to play well. Well, now both teams aren't playing well, so
Yeah,
it's a rivalry that a lot of people want to see come back, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. TSM maybe can get back to that level. I don't see it happening for CLG, but regardless of that, I'm going with TSM. I think that they're just better than CLG. I think CLG is bad. I've made that pretty clear. So TSM by default.
yeah. I mean, this was sort of like always referred to as like the El Clasico of like NALCS, and honestly, I think recently, C9 versus Team Liquid is the El Clasico. So that
Yeah,
rivalry's dead.
true.
Don't talk about it. Don't bring it up. It's no more. Don't talk about it. Last game of the day and last game of the week, we got Golden Guardians versus 100T. I think it's pretty obvious. I'm going Golden Guardians.
Yeah, I'm going Golden Guardians on this one too, and I do also one little thing that I want to say about this is if Golden Guardians loses this game, I'll be really disappointed. This is a must win,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Golden Guardians is maybe we talked about this maybe on that path of going above 500 for the first time in ever. So if that's going to happen, this is a game you gotta win. So I definitely think they will, but yeah, Golden Guardians for me.
All right, that's going to do it for our picks and predictions. Choose your word, whichever word you prefer. For week 7, you want to close it out, Jamie?
Yeah, just want to thank everyone that showed up to the stream today. For those listening live, we do really apologize. There is a lot of lag issues today. We had some issues with having to move J and T around to a different location, and so the the lag is apparent and we know about it. There's just not much we can really do about it. And for those listening, thank you for listening. Thank you for checking us out on YouTube. Please do us the favor if you enjoyed the content to subscribe and to like the videos. It definitely does mean a lot to us. And even leave a comment if you would like. We do check the comments. So thanks again to everybody that is supporting the podcast. It really means a lot to us. And feel free to reach out to us, whether it be through Discord or whether it be through our social medias that are on screen. We do love to hear from you guys, and it means a lot to us.
Yeah, we'll definitely. I'll try to see if there are any potential fixes for, the lagginess and the overall quality of the stream for next week. But appreciate anyone who stuck around during the technical difficulties. So thank you everyone for watching, and we hope to see you back here next week.
Thanks, everyone.